Hello everyone, this is International Grandmaster Nadezhda Kosintseva for chesslectures.com, and today we will explore a fascinating tense game between two very famous Dutch players, Van Vele against Piquet. You will see how black lifted the rooks in this game to activate the pieces, to coordinate the rooks with other pieces, and created very strong attacking threat, specifically thanks to his rook lifts. Okay, the game started in the English system with the following moves: c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6. It's a classical setup for English system. Black took control over the middle, white started on the queen side, opening up the queen. Both players developed the knights, and at this point white usually decides how to move the light squared bishop out. There are two popular ways to develop it. One of them is g3 to bring the bishop to the long diagonal. In this game, however, Van Vele preferred e3. It's also very popular continuation, and specifically it works against d5. If black decides to open up the center at this point, white's light squared bishop can be pretty valuable on the f1 a6 diagonal. After white exchanges the pawns and plays bishop b5, white immediately puts pressure on the central e5 pawn by pinning the knight on c6, the knight that defends specifically pawn on e5. Because of it, black usually tries to develop the dark squared bishop first, so Piquet continued with bishop b4, and at this point black probably agrees to trade the dark squared bishop for the knight. Usually if bishop goes to b4, it means at some point bishop will be traded, exchanged for the knight, and black should take into account white's play with knight d5. However, immediately black does not worry about it. If black pushes e-pawn, if black plays e4, white may have hard time to find good setup for his kingside knight, and knight takes f6, queen takes f6 only helps black to improve the queen, to activate the queen. So instead of it, white played queen c2, and now knight d5 is coming. So if black plays regular move like castling, knight d5 can be more annoying. It's still logical move for white to attack the dark squared bishop, but this time white has good control over the b1 h7 diagonal, so if black plays e4, it allows white to take the central pawn with the queen after he trades the knights, and it explains why black usually tries to take the knight immediately. Bishop takes c3 was played in the game. White kind of saved time on a3. White did not encourage bishop to take the knight. However, it's still pretty good trade for black. After queen takes c3, the e5 pawn is in danger, so black played queen e7 to take care of it, and it also can help black to improve the queen. Maybe in some variations black can be willing to consider and play knight b4, so queen can be helpful. Just to take care of the b4 square, white included a3. Now we can expect b4 pawn advance on the queen side to expand, to get more room for white's pieces, so to prevent it black played a5, and Van Vele continued with b3. Looks a little bit slow, a little bit passive. On one hand, white logically continues the development. The dark squared bishop can go to the long diagonal and can be considered as a sneaky bishop, looking at some black pieces on that diagonal. However, maybe if white does not push this pawn immediately, he could have a chance to play b4 later, which looks more aggressive, more active. In the game, black castled the king, white moved the dark squared bishop as he planned, bishop b2, and rook e8. Black needs to bring another piece to take care of the e5 pawn, and at this point white has a principal continuation to consider, d4. It can be one of the logical moves to try, because white has a bishop pair, so if white opens up more lines, he can benefit from having bishops. However, because the white king is in the middle and not castled yet, white should be very accurate with pushing pawns in the front of the king. E takes d4 does not look so dangerous, because after knight takes d4 there is no simple way for black to open up the center. In the case of knight e4, I believe white just ready for tactical play. In between, knight c6 move helps white to win material. So white opens up the long diagonal for queen and bishop battery and ready to checkmate on g7. So the c6 knight is untouchable for this reason. And in the case of knight takes queen, white also takes the black queen and goes with a check. So white gets time to take another piece, to take knight on c3. So white has extra bishop at the end. Alternatively to e takes d4, black should consider e4 because it can keep the position more closed. But from the white's point of view, he is not obligated to just move the knight. In the case of, let's say, knight d2, black can continue with d5, and it looks pretty promising. Black has two strong pawns in the middle, black keeps developing, black just open up the light squared bishop. In the case of cd5, the knight appears in the middle. But again, coming back to the position after black pushed pawn to e4, white has a better continuation. White can continue with d5, and it makes the position more open, more dynamic, which is good for white because of his bishops. And after, let's say, e takes f3, d takes c6, black can take another pawn with a tempo. F takes g2, white is forked, so white should take back with the bishop. And after d takes c6, even if black won a pawn, position is not so clear, and white may have a pretty decent compensation. White open up the long diagonal as well as the g line, so white pretty soon brings one of his rooks to the g line. It can be rook h1 g1, or if white castles queenside, maybe another rook is coming as well. So position does not look actually so comfortable for black, so I believe white has pretty interesting dynamic play to compensate material disadvantage. However, in the game, Van Velle preferred less aggressive, more modest continuation. He played d3. He probably wants to castle first to secure the king, and later on he can come back to ideas of advancing pawns. However, black is not going to wait, so black decided to open the position by himself. Black played d5. It's actually a very logical move, taking into account black's benefits in the middle of the board. Black tries to be more energetic, more vigorous, taking into account his lead in development. And black does not worry so much about opening lines at this point because there is no simple way for white to use his bishop pair. After c takes d5, knight takes d5, queen is hanging, so Van Velle moved the queen to c2. Piquet immediately moved his light squared bishop out. He played bishop g4, bishop b2, rook a d8. Black plays naturally, very classically. Black centralizes the rooks. Black developed all minor pieces, and it looks pretty comfortable for black. He has pawn in the middle to restrict white's pieces, specifically the dark squared bishop. Pawn on a5 limits white's potential advance with b4. So looks like black has pretty comfortable setup after the opening. Van Velle castled the king and rook d6. It's where this efficient rook play begins. So black takes into account the special advantage. Black has more space for his pieces because of his central pawn on e5. So black can bring the rook into the game without trading a lot of pawns. Rook is heading to the king side. It can be g6 or h6 squares. And it's actually not so easy for white to find a good plan at this point. For example, advancing d pawn, playing d4 can be controversial due to e4, a forcing play, and in the case of knight e5, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2. I believe black can consider just to trade the knights at this point, playing knight takes e5 to double white's pawns. Alternatively, black can just play f6 to force white knight either move away or exchange the knights on c6. In both cases, black seems to have better minor piece at the end. d5 knight looks more useful compared to the white's dark squared bishop that is locked by white's own pawn chain. Alternatively to d4, e4 look not promising at all because of knight f4. It just helps black to bring the knight closer to the white king, to target the g2 pawn as well as the bishop on e2 and another pawn on d3. Maybe at this point it could be better for white just to play rook ac1, bringing his rook to a better position just in case. However, Van Velle decided to play more aggressive move. He played queen c4, targeting the black bishop on g4. Queen honestly is not well placed on c4. I would say one move attack that eventually does not work well for white. Black has a few good ways to take care of the bishop. Black preferred queen d7 in the game. It's not just about protecting the bishop. Black starts repositioning the queen, and at some point I believe queen can go to g4, maybe h3 squares to bother the white king. At this point Van Velle played rook ac1 and black responded with knight b6. Black tries to remove the white queen from the fourth rank and also opens up the d line for his rook and queen battery. And at this point Van Velle played queen c2. It looks safe. At the same time, queen b5 could be a better choice at this point. It looks kind of scary maybe to bring the queen so close to many black pieces. However, there is no simple way to attack the queen. I guess in the case of rook d5, white just prepared protection. Rook c5 blocks the attack, and after rook takes c5, queen takes c5, white queen feels much more comfortable. There is an opportunity for forcing play. Black can calculate bishop takes f3, and after bishop takes f3, knight d4. It's actually pretty typical discovered attack. Looking at the two queens on the same diagonal, black does not worry to lose the knight. White should play queen takes d7 at this point, and after knight takes f3, black should include this check to make sure he does not end up without knight. After g takes f3, rook takes d7, rook fd1. Black seems to have better pawn formation, but I don't think it will be easy for black to prove it, to convert his small strategic advantage. White has pretty sneaky dark square bishop to target the e5 pawn. Now the c1 rook can be more useful and go to the fifth rank to create additional attacks on a5, e5, and maybe later c7 pawns, so white should be okay. Okay, we go back to the game. After white played queen c2, Piquet was very consistent in his plans. He continued with rook g6, that is why rook started this lift. Rook is looking at the g2 pawn. White should now permanently calculate bishop h3 ideas, and alternatively, if black plays bishop takes f3, white is not going to take back with the pawn. Bishop takes f3 could be a better choice for him, and if rook takes d3, white has his capture. Bishop takes c6. After b takes c6, maybe it's not the best idea to take it one more time. Queen c6 allows black to recapture pawn on b3, but just playing rook fd1, I believe white feels pretty comfortable. Being down a pawn does not hurt white this time. Black has pretty bad pawn formation on the queen side, double pawns that white can easily attack. White just got rid of his pawn weakness on d3, open up the line in the middle, so position should be fine for white. As usually, it can be more important to focus on initiative rather than material advantage, so rook g6 definitely can be more annoying for white. Worrying about bishop h3, Van Velle moved his king to the corner. He played king h1 and rook h6. This annoying rook does not leave the white king alone. Now black is aiming at the h2 pawn, and I don't think black is going to repeat the moves. In the case of king g1, black can continue with the queen, like queen f5. Queen is coming closer, so the h2 pawn can be a target anyway. And just to illustrate the power of this rook, let's try this line. For example, white just focuses on the queen side. Let's say white plays b4. I guess we can include one capture, a before queen f5. Black needs more forces to create more dangerous attacks, so queen f5 looks consistent. And if white plays b5, now queen h5 makes it really annoying. h2 pawn is in danger. After bishop takes f3, black can checkmate quickly, and h3 does not help at all because of bishop takes h3, and there is no good way for white to stop black's attack. For example, knight h2 will be met by another forcing move, bishop takes g2. Everything goes with tempi, so black keeps revealing the white king and just gets the decisive advantage. Understanding the danger, Van Velle played knight g1. He tries to simplify, he tries to trade the light squared bishops. Piquet decided not to rush, not to force anything. He played rook d8. Looks like another rook is coming as well. And after rook fd1, the d3 pawn was hanging. Black planned for bishop trade followed by queen d3. Black suddenly switched his rook again. There is probably no efficient way to attack the h2 pawn, so black decided to focus on the middle of the board. It's actually a classical example of stretching enemy defense. Black plays everywhere. Black does not limit his play by just one flank. d3 pawn is obvious weakness, so black can definitely use it against white. At this point, I think the best continuation for white could be bishop takes g4, queen takes g4, and knight f3. Knight comes back to target the e5 pawn, and I would say black still has better chances. White's position still looks passive, at the same time solid. Trading the bishops, white got some relief on the king side, so I don't think he worries about h2 pawn anymore. And maybe at some point, if black allows, white can simplify, playing b4, d4. White can start some simplification, some trade. In the game, however, Van Velde played knight f3 immediately. It allows black to keep additional attacking resource on the board. I'm talking about the light squared bishop. And black played queen f5. Definitely queen should participate, so queen comes closer. And now black is still thinking about queen h5 followed by rook h6. Another chance for white to trade the light squared bishop was knight h4, and I believe it could be a better continuation. After queen h5, bishop takes g4, queen takes g4. Again, there is nothing better than knight f3 back, but it's kind of the same. White is passive but solid. Instead of it, Van Velde played b4. He rushes to advance on the queen side. He hopes to deflect black from his attacking play on the opposite king side. But looks like white miscalculated something. So after a takes b4, a takes b4, black continued with bishop takes f3. And I believe it's where white maybe made some inaccuracies, mistakes in his calculation. At first glance, it looks logical to take back with the bishop, but in this case, knight takes b4 should work pretty well for black. It attacks the queen, and after queen takes c7, knight takes d3 helps black to create multiple threats. First of all, knight takes f2 to win the rook, to fork white. The bishop on b2 is exposed, rook on c1. We can try to continue the line. Let's say white plays e4, contre-attacking move. Now knight takes f2 is not so efficient because after king g1 the black queen is hanging, so black has no time to start taking the white pieces. But after queen f4, black keeps all his threats. I think at some point white can consider just to trade rook for this knight, but after rook takes d3, black now has ideas on the back rank. So for example, queen takes b6 leads to a checkmate after black sacrifices the queen. And rook, black finally delivers back rank checkmate, game is over. So looks like knight on d3 should give black the decisive material advantage at this point. So we go back to the moment after black played bishop takes f3. White decided to take back with the pawn. White hopes that king is not so bad in the corner. White probably plans to bring the rook to the g line, and if necessary, rook g2 to cover the h2 pawn. Knight d5. Time for the b6 knight to come closer, and besides attacking the pawn on b4, knight can participate in king side attacks as well. Definitely playing this move, black should predict e4, but in fact it just weakens the squares and allows black to advance the queen even closer to the white king. So queen f4 looking at the h2 pawn can be very annoying, and e takes d5 just loses the game after rook h6. The checkmate is unavoidable. Van Velde instead of it played b5. Looks like white does not feel the danger so much. White focuses on his queen side play, but actually black is ready for a decisive strike, and his next move was knight d4. So white just encouraged the black knight to jump to this central square. It goes with the tempo, and it's the key moment, the decisive moment of this game. White still could keep some chances if bishop takes d4. Bishop takes d4 was a better move. And if black just automatically takes back, actually after e4, now white has some defense for the h2 pawn. For example, let's take a look at this line. Queen h5, e takes d5, rook h6. Looks like black is ready to deliver checkmate, but queen takes c7. This move changes everything. Immediately white white queen protects the pawn on h2, counterattacks the rook on d8, so black is just losing. From the black's point of view, though, he is not obligated to take the bishop immediately. I'm not sure if black could predict it during the game, but there is rook h6 move that can be more annoying for white. It immediately threatens the h2 pawn. d5 knight is still alive to protect pawn on c7. I believe black plans for queen h5. Maybe not queen h3 because of bishop e5, but queen h5 still guarding e5 and attacking pawn on h2. There is e d4 that is coming as well. And knight f4 maybe is possible just to sacrifice another knight, but bring the queen to f4. For example, just look at this line. If bishop goes to the corner, knight f4 should decide the game. E takes f4, queen takes f4, and there is no good defense for h2 pawn anymore. Maybe the best chance for white is just to take e5 pawn immediately, so after queen takes e5, white can play f4 to block the diagonal for the queen. After knight takes f4, white is not going to take back because queen f4 just helps black to break through, but queen c7 can be played instead. Black is lucky and can avoid queen trade by using some forcing play. He can continue with queen d5. It forces e4, then queen goes to g5. It resumes the threat of queen g2 checkmate, at the same time protecting the rook on d8. In the case of rook g1, I believe black just plays queen h4. And checkmate is coming. Queen h2 is unavoidable. Bishop f1 does not help because of rook g6. Now black delivers checkmate on g1. And finally, bishop f3, probably the best bet for white, but black can still finish his attack after queen h4, king g1, queen takes h2, king f1, queen sacrifice helps black to checkmate by force. Black was faster. Black is winning. Game is over for white. Anyway, bishop takes d4 was the best practical chance for white. Maybe it's not easy for black to find rook h6, and we cannot guarantee that black would play this move in the game. After e takes d4, it was easy for black to point out white's weaknesses. Black continued with rook h6, queen f4, queen h5. These moves are coming. If white, let's say, plays bishop f1 with the idea to block the rook by playing h3, black does not even need to take pawn on f3. It does not help so much due to bishop g2. But queen h5, h3, knight f4 just puts more and more pressure on the white king. I believe it just impossible for white to defend all his weak points on the king side. Black has a bunch of threats. Queen takes f3, knight takes h3, so white does not have enough time to take care of the king. In the game, white played rook g1, and I believe Van Velle hopes to bring the rook to defend the h2 pawn, but knight f4 stops white's ideas with rook g2. Knight is very annoying, and white cannot really do a lot of things to get rid of it. Black is ready for sacrificing. Actually playing this move, black created a forcing threat. Rook takes h2 followed by queen h3. That is why white cannot afford, for example, queen takes c7. In the game, white played rook g4, trying to block the queen. Another move we could consider is rook g3, but after queen h5, looks like white loses h2 pawn anyway. We can continue with king g1. King tries to escape. Queen h2, king f1, queen h1, rook g1. Looks like white almost escaped. King is ready to go to e1 d2, but now another sacrifice makes it impossible for white to secure the king. After king takes g1, rook d8 goes to d6 to support another one. Looks like there is nothing that can stop rook d g6 followed by rook h1 checkmate. White is losing. So we continue with the game. After rook g4, black played queen h5, h4. There's nothing else that can help white to stop queen takes h2. Okay, looks like white almost defended the king. Rook g4 supports pawn on h4. If black tries to put more pressure on it, white starts his counter-attacking play with queen c7. But it's just illusion. After queen takes h4, black again uses queen sacrificing to completely reveal the white king. And after rook takes h4, rook takes h4, king g1, rook d6. This final rook lift just decides the game. Similarly to the line we discussed before, there is no good way for white to stop rook g6, followed by rook h1. Checkmate is coming, so white just resigned. As you could see in this game, black very efficiently used rook lifts to coordinate his pieces to take control over the squares, both in the middle and king side. This maneuvering allowed black to pressure white's positions, to stretch his defense and dominate white on different sides of the board. I hope you enjoyed this game. It was Nadezhda Kosintseva for chesslectures.com. Thank you for watching.